All right. Welcome, welcome, listeners and guests. We are super excited to have you here. Jacie is back today, and she is really showing up in the space of serving entrepreneurs that struggle with chronic stress and then also emotional well being. Like there's some turmoil happening inside. And she really brings about 15 years or more of deep knowledge, not only just in the professional space, but also in her personal life as well, of helping with those who've lived traumatic lives, maybe back in childhood, heavy, chronic, crippling types of different traumas that interfere and kind of keep us stuck in the entrepreneurial space, right? And so there's a certain passion that we show up with, but then, we can get to a certain point and then we kind of run into some struggles. And so she is really good at helping us overcome those struggles. And so welcome, JC. Super excited to have you here. We are good friends and always love talking to you because you bring so much wisdom, not only to the world, but also to the marketplace. So, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dina. That was one of the most lovely introductions I've ever gotten.
Aw, thank you. Yeah. And so, you have been a guest on our podcast before. Were just so thrilled to have you back because you've transformed your own business. You were kind of helping more so like military men who had struggled with PTSD, and now you've transitioned to really kind of, helping entrepreneurs, and so it's a little bit of a different space, and so tell me how that transition happened for you.
So I'm actually still doing the military and PTSD work because I run a private practice in counseling for those who don't know me. And that private practice in counseling focuses on helping people heal from PTSD and primarily through group therapy programs and community focused healing. So I bring my counseling background there and I run that organization. And as an entrepreneur myself, running that business as well as some other ones that I've had throughout the last 12 years, I suppose, I've recognized a huge trend in myself, but also within the the world of business and entrepreneurship and highly achieving, very successful people. The trend that I see is you've got the check marks, things are good, business is going well, but, and there always seems to be this big glaring, yeah, but what if? Or, but this is going wrong, or I don't feel happy. So that to me really speaks to how easy it is to cover up our own insecurities, hang-ups, traumas, limiting beliefs, or lack of emotional connection with success and achievements. There It's a completely different type of healing when you are a high achiever, as opposed to someone who maybe is stuck in poverty and trauma. Those are they're just different life experiences, right? And although the underlying root causes are often identical, the conversations that need to be had to pull people out of it can be very different. And so, through my own experience, working with other entrepreneurs, other business owners, being one myself, and also working with people who are healing from severe PTSD, I recognized and began to see more clearly that there are so many commonalities, but we can't address them the same way. The conversation around my newest brand, Chronic Presence, comes into play, where it is speaking directly to the people who have utilized their own limitations to create something amazing in their life, but they've hit the glass ceiling from that emotional standpoint where the joy and the happiness and the fulfillment that they expected to get at the end of it just never showed up. And that's who I am now speaking to and working with. And I love it because I've had this quote come to me as I've been developing this program and working with more people. And I feel like it was very much a God download while I was driving in the car one day. The world doesn't need more empty heart or more deep pockets and empty hearts. As business owners, as leaders in our communities, we get to be and create the new paradigm of heart led achievers, generous, joyful entrepreneurs. And because business owners, entrepreneurs, high achieving, wide reaching individuals have so much power over the culture of their micro environment and their macro environment, to bring those people to a space of true fulfillment, alignment, presence, joy provides a trickle down effect that we can't even begin to imagine. And I've just become really passionate about bringing that type of healing to that specific audience.
That's amazing. And there's so much to unpack in there. You and I have talked about this before, but like, how whoever they is, right? They say you're a sum of the 5 people that you hang out with most, right? And so I love that you talked about that trickle down because as you elevate and change your core values and who you are, right? And get more aligned with how you were designed, how God designed you. We were all knit in our mother's womb for a purpose and a time like this, right? And so I love that you're talking about that because there is so much now science even proving that, which is really cool. And so you get the like computer upgrade, right? And then your whole surroundings also just by default, even in the Bible where it talks about Abraham and how the people around him just couldn't help but be blessed because the blessings just kind of came off of Abraham and just kind of trickled down, just like you're saying. And so when we look at, successful people, a lot of them, we start out in business for we're passionate, right? There's something that we're passionate about. And then something happens. Like we get to a certain point where either like a lot of times we are we're in this like phase where we're trying to do things on our own accord apart from God, right? We're striving to fulfill some sort of something. We're outside looking. Tell me a little bit more about like how your program really addresses that because I think that's a real big part of like where entrepreneurs hit a wall, so to speak.
I've recently, maybe because I'm talking about this more, so my algorithm is feeding me more of this information, but I've recently seen posts by people like Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO. I just saw a post pop up on my algorithm from him the other day that said, I've learned in my success that my home is nothing without my partner. And my life is true. Like I would give up everything for her because of the joy and the love and the connection that comes from this relationship. I saw another post. It was an interview between Cody Sanchez and Mel Robbins. And one thing that Cody said in the interview is she struggles with the slowing down and being present and basking in the day to day moments as a really successful, very busy business owner. So, one of the primary challenges that I present to people is where do you feel tension in your day? And where can you move from tension into presence? Most people have no idea what I mean when I ask that question. And that question, in and of itself, becomes the foundation of the year-long mentorships that we do. It sounds like such a simple thing when you're in your body with that question. Very, very few people have any direction. Just for the listeners, I'll give you guys an example of exactly what that might look like. If you're making lunches for your kids, and as you're making lunches for your kids, you are thinking about the meeting that you've got at 8 a.m. and the podcast interview that you have booked for 12, and then you have to run to school to pick the kids up to get them to their extracurriculars. You're not making lunches. You're probably doing this. gotta do this, and I'm gonna put this here, and I'm gonna do that. Okay, and then I gotta cut this up. And if you actually stop and check yourself, everything in you, mentally and physically, is just held. And that feeling that comes into our body where everything is held, in my experience, that is the definition of striving that you just talked about. So, what is the difference when you drop your shoulders, release the tension from your hands and your arms, you take a breath, and you look at what's in front of you, which is, in my opinion, I have kids, I make lunches every night, which I used to hate, frankly. It was one of the dreaded activities of parenting, and now it's actually one of my favorite parts of the day because in that moment, the way it is in my world, the kids are usually getting themselves ready for bed. I'm making their lunches. I get to decide what they get nourished with the next day, and I know it sounds cliche, but I'm gonna sound cheesy sometimes, and that's okay. I get to be present with that. I genuinely get joy out of seeing their cute little bento boxes get filled up with, like, fresh cut fruit and what I love it. It makes me happy to look at that, and in the background, maybe there's chaos, maybe they're having a good day and they're laughing, or maybe they're having a bad day and they're fighting because they're sisters and it's what they do, but there's joy and there's beauty in being present in that moment, and so the striving is always about what's next, what's more, what do I need to do? Joy is where are my feet in this moment and who do I get to be? When we switch out of doing mindset all the time into the being mindset, which is really one of alignment with who God created you to be, everything changes. Your relationships become much more meaningful. You begin to experience vulnerability and connection and purpose within your interpersonal relationships, within your relationship to yourself. You step away from survival because that striving mentality and energy puts your nervous system into fight or flight, which, even if you're a highly successful, high achieving person, prevents your creativity. It stops you from seeing big picture opportunities for your life, for yourself, and for your business. So even if you're like top caliber, you're killing it, you're making the big bucks, you've got a bunch of employees underneath you, they're all getting paid, even with that level of success, you will be capping yourself if you're in striving because your nervous system in fight or flight cannot be creative the same way that it can be from presence. And that's really what this entire journey is about. More presence, finding more beauty in the mundane, appreciating the challenges and the wins. And the other piece of it that a lot of people would love to be able to avoid, but you can't get to this place of joy without it, is being present actually requires you to feel emotional waves that move through you in a day. And that in and of itself is a whole other conversation. Really, that's where we move out of the striving high achiever embodiment into the embodiment of the empowered, heart led leader.
And I love that you're saying that because, one of the things that I'm thinking about is, we've got crowns that we receive in heaven, right? And when we get to heaven, we can, from what we've done here, we can earn these crowns, right? And there's a crown of rejoicing, a crown of righteousness, the crown of glory, the crown of life, right? And there is no crown of striving, you know? And it's like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? That just is so I call it fleshy, where it's
Mhm.
like it's so, like, worldly, and really, I think the whole idea of what you do and how you, like, change the heart of the individual to be in that present moment, and so talk a little bit about, like, how just having that little shift of like, let me actually feel my emotion. What is something that you say, number one, to somebody who doesn't like to feel or hasn't felt or has a hard time identifying what they feel?
The very first thing that I share with people when we're going into this process is your feelings can't kill you. And that sounds a little bit over dramatic and or blunt depending on the person who's receiving it. But at the end of the day, I've never seen an exception to this rule. I'm sure it exists somewhere in the world. I'm just saying in my many years and thousands of people that I've worked with, I've never seen it. If you ask why long enough about what you're avoiding, somewhere down that rabbit hole, you will get the answer. Your nervous system, your subconscious, or your body thinks it will kill you. Our subconscious is very dramatic. We are little drama queens who love to be at the center of our own story, and we like to feel very important. And that's okay. That's part of the human condition that we have been born into this life to experience and to live through. At the end of the day, feeling your anger, feeling your sadness, feeling your own fear, not living in them, there's a huge difference, but feeling them will not cause your demise. That's a critical shift for almost everyone to make. There are very few people who feel safe to move through their emotions. Now, the other piece of this that I like to bring in early on with people is the understanding that emotions are physical sensations. They do not inherently have a great deal of meaning. However, we have become experts at developing meaning around our emotions. And so it's very important to be able to differentiate between your stories and your emotions. Your stories are thoughts, they are beliefs. Your emotions are a physiological experience in your body. Create stories based on the physiological experience, they are not the same. I explain this to my kids all the time. Feeling like someone doesn't like you and someone not liking you are different. Also, feeling like someone doesn't like you is an inappropriate use of the word feeling because that is not a feeling, that is a story. So, really, in the process of learning how to feel, learning how to be in your body requires a discernment between that's actually a story and a belief that I've developed. It's not the feeling. That's really important, in my opinion, in our current culture because there's a huge narrative of your feelings are valid. The internet might hate me, but your feelings are not always valid. They are always important. It is always important to experience the physical feeling moving through your body and to be with yourself. That doesn't mean the story that you've created about it is even remotely in alignment with truth. That can really challenge people. A lot of people will hear that, especially outside the context of a session. If I'm in a coaching session with someone and we can work through this on a deeper level, it makes a lot of sense in the lived experience of it. But for me to just explain it and someone listen to me say that on a podcast, it's a sound bite that someone might love to take out and blast or cancel someone for, right? And that's okay. That's okay. I'm not probably not talking to those people. Likely those people aren't going to be the ones working with me anyway. But yes, that discernment between feeling, emotion is a physical experience. Thinking thoughts is a mental experience. And creating separation between those two is one of the most liberating things you'll ever do because you'll start to realize me being extremely angry at my business partner because I think they acted in a way that was horribly unethical or they lied to me or they did this. Checking where your anger is in your body, processing that anger physically first, then moving into the logical and mental side of the practice is going to completely change how you, first of all, perceive the situation to begin with. And second of all, it's going to completely change how you address the situation with the other person. Thirdly, you're going to become a different version of yourself when you've processed your emotions and then taken time to work with the thoughts around it. Is that making sense?
Absolutely, and I think, like, what you're helping your clients with too is also a skill set. Being able to take a situation and kind of look at it, kind of stepping outside yourself almost, like, "Okay, this is how it's potentially making me feel," and then discerning, is that really a feeling or is that a story that I'm telling myself, right? Or and then, like, taking yourself out of that situation and, like, how can I look at it with fresh eyes and without being attached to the outcome? That's kinda how I look at things too, and it totally helps me, right? Because then I'm like, "Alright, I'm being a little over dramatic here," and, like, could I have some, patience and kindness and understanding and grace in this situation? Absolutely, and so I think there's huge potential to be able to, number 1, learn how to feel your emotions in the way that God designed us to feel them and not hold them, because you and I both know, like, when you hold on to your emotions, that causes physical discomfort and dis-ease in some way. There is so much science that backs this up that can link exactly the body part with the emotion that's tied to it, where you will feel it, that kinda thing, and so I think it's imperative for entrepreneurs to have this skill set, right?
It is. It's so important. And I'm going to go back to that creativity piece that I mentioned earlier, because the fight or flight response in the nervous system is going to reduce the amount of cognitive function that you have. Whereas when you are existing in a state of presence, calmness, and embodiment, and for those who don't know what I mean by that, embodiment means you are able to physically feel into your body as you also interact with the external world. That's what I mean in this context. It can mean other things, but in this context, that's what I'm referring to. I distracted myself with my definition. Help, Dina. Where was I going with this?
I don't know where you were going, however, I do know too that what you're talking about spills over into relationships, right? And so
So when we're in our bodies that way and we're present and we're calm, when we're not doing this, and instead we are the parts of your brain that engage in creative, non-linear, abstract thinking are engaged. That's where people get aha moments. Many people talk about, oh, I get my best thoughts in the shower or right before I'm falling asleep or when you're doing these mundane, benign activities. And it's because that actually is activating, in particular, your alpha brainwave, which allows more creative problem solving, more creative solutions, and more creative perspectives. You can't engage fully with that if you are repressing or fighting against your emotions. You have to be able to feel your emotions in order to fully engage with that creative process in your mind. So when you are looking at it, even from a standpoint of, I'm a high achiever, but I want to be more of a high achiever, you actually are limiting yourself if you're still in striving.
that is profound, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs live there, and I think a lot of them live in that space, and so I think so many people could really benefit from your program and gaining this as skill set, which, changes their heart, changes the whole idea of, like, stress and how they manage their stress or, have skills now to manage their stress because they probably weren't before, and it's like once you get those plates spinning, you can't, take your eye off the plate or the plate falls, right? And so to the person who feels like they don't have time to do this, what would you say?
So they've actually done studies on this. And scientifically speaking, folks, if you have an I don't have time mindset, the most effective way to change that feeling is to do something that feels unproductive. That could be sitting down and painting. It could be making a really bad painting with a bunch of art supplies from the Dollar Tree. It could be reading a novel that has no considerable effect intellectually. It could be playing soccer in the backyard with your kids, if that normally would feel like a waste of time to you. The more you engage and live in agreement with this mentality that you don't have time for things that bring you joy, the stronger you're building that lie up in yourself. And they can do brain scans to prove this. Really, the question is, and I'm not in the business of convincing anyone. That's very much, we talked about this the other day. I just don't have the energy in my life to spend it trying to convince other people to change. So, if someone's listening to this and they are thinking everything I'm saying is ridiculous and they don't have time and they don't need it, then that is absolutely their right to think that. For someone who's a little bit curious about it and isn't sure or doesn't know how to create time, the very first thing I would say is take a really honest look at your screen time. Most people, even if you kind of have a handle on it, you're probably wasting 30 to 60 minutes a day scrolling. But I'm even talking to the people who are like, no, I limit my screen time. I don't doom scroll, any of that. You could probably still take a look at it. The thing about not having time for this type of work is really what you're saying is that you don't value your own happiness. At the end of the day, where we spend our money and where we spend our time shows which values we're living in alignment with. A lot of people, if I were to ask them their top 5 values, they would list something to the effect of health, family, work, spirituality, like those would land often friends. Those are often the top 5. And I ask people to then rank the priority in terms of where are you putting the best of your energy? Almost without fail, the bottom 2 ranking priorities are getting the top percent of their best energy. If you say that your health and well-being, which is what we're talking about here, guys. It doesn't mean going for a run, or it doesn't exclusively mean going to the gym, whatever. If you say that your health and well-being is a top priority for you, but you're not prioritizing that at the top of your schedule, you're not in alignment with your values. And that can shift. It doesn't mean that it has to take up all of your time. But if it's number 1, it better be number 1 priority in your schedule, which means taking an hour a week to work with someone who can help you get closer to those goals, or taking the first 20 minutes of your day to do something that gets you closer to that goal, right? And so if you're living in that I don't have time for this kind of thing mindset or paradigm, just rank your values. What's your most important value? Rank them 1 through 5. And then take an honest look at it and ask yourself, where am I putting the prioritization of my energy in relation to these? And are those lining up?
I love that, and I always say too, like, "Well, do you have time to be burned out?" Because, like, we all know that either you manage your stress or the stress manages you, right? And so, like, if you're not choosing one, you're choosing the other. And so, in light of that awareness, right? It's like, yeah, I love that you're saying rank them because I do find that we may say our health is a priority or we may say spirituality is a priority, but yet we're not reading the Bible and we're not doing anything in the remote area of, value. All the things that bring it to a value are not being done. Like you can't have health as your value and then you eat ice cream for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? And brownies, right? And so eliciting those core values and understanding like what are the action steps that I am taking to make sure that that is a top priority? Where am I spending that time and prioritizing my time in areas that may not even be remotely productive? And most of us have times that we spend unaware of doing something, right? Like, that's something too, right, to address. Like, is that the story that you're telling yourself? Time is just slipping by, right? And so then what are you going to do with your time?
I think I've reverse engineered that completely for myself because the older I get, the more excited I am for the decades ahead. Now, I have to say that's because I've been doing this work so long, I've watched the transition happen from I mean, for those who don't know my backstory, I was raised in a not ideal situation. So by the time I was 20, I was struggling with severe PTSD, alcohol addiction, bulimia, and sex and love addiction. I was not happy. I was not thriving. I was struggling every day of my life. On top of that, I've dealt with a life-threatening autoimmune disorder my entire life, which got particularly bad in my late 20s. And those were all very dark times, very challenging experiences. There wasn't joy, there wasn't excitement for the future, there was dread. Most days were woken up with a sense of dread and heaviness of, I have to get through another 24 hours. And by doing all of this work, I watched layer after layer after layer of addiction and trauma and self-hatred. I'm not gonna say melt away, get torn away until now, I look ahead at the next 30 years of my life, and I am so excited at the prospect of getting older, getting more experiences, and getting to be who I am now moving forward and continuing to grow, continuing to become more aligned with myself, more connected to love, more embodied. And that learning process actually is something that I look forward to now instead of dreading. And I really believe everybody can reach that point if they're committed to it.
Absolutely. I love that. And yeah, your story is just so profound. You're one of the most inspiring people that I know. Just you've been through so much and overcome so much, and it just exudes hope. I hope and pray that you connect with JC, and you do have a ebook, right? That you're going to share.
I am working on an ebook. I'm hoping for the new year that I'll have that ready. But for right now, my Instagram is chronic.presence, which
Mhm.
we can link in the show notes. And my personal Instagram is Jacie.target, although I use that one less often. So those are the best ways to get a hold of me at this point.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We so appreciate you, listeners. JC, thank you so much for being on here as a guest. We love having you and hosting you here. Listeners, if you would help us out, like, subscribe, share this podcast with a friend that is maybe struggling with any of these topics, feeling their presence, just being present, like stress, overwhelm, it happens quite often in the entrepreneurial space. Most entrepreneurs, they feel alone and misunderstood. And so you may be giving them a lifeline as you share this. And we so appreciate you doing so. Thank you so much.